This week on LTC News, a celebration of Jack Kerouac, getting out the local vote.
Last year, I think we had 21%, which to me is still pretty low, given that last year we had a huge controversial issue about the location of the high school.
And Cambodian refugees targeted for deportation.
There were about 10 Cambodians that were on the list, 5 from Lowell, 4 from Lynn, 1 from Worcester. Only 6 people checked in, and then out of the 6, 4 were let go and 2 were detained.
All this and much more on this edition of LTC News. Welcome to LTC News. I'm your host, Krista Brown. The U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, or ICE, has ordered several Lowell Cambodian refugees living here legally to report for deportation. These individuals committed crimes in the past, and despite already serving their time, are now facing an uncertain future outside of the U.S. Rallies against this new deportation policy were held in Burlington and Boston in early October. Souvanna Pouv, Executive Director of Lowell's Cambodian Mutual Assistance Association, was present at the rallies and outlined what's at stake for Lowell's Cambodian community.
My name is Souvanna Pouv. I'm the Executive Director of the Cambodian Mutual Assistance Association. We've always offered services and programs to make sure people are able to live the full life that they want to live. But now we're looking at certain things that are happening that's affecting our community. We want to make sure that the people that we have helped in the past, we're able to continue to help today. And so I did attend the first few rallies recently.
A week and a half ago, ARW and the Asian Outreach Unit at Greater Boston Legal Services received confirmation that on October 3rd, this coming Thursday, ICE issued notices for Cambodian community members across the country, including community members in Massachusetts, to check in, essentially to turn themselves in where they will face imminent detention and deportation. Wow. So in response, we are here today to make a public stance to bring to the fore the urgency of this issue.
There were about 10 Cambodians that were on the list, 5 from Lowell, 4 from Lynn, 1 from Worcester. Only 6 people checked in, and then out of the 6, 4 were let go and 2 were detained.
After having served their time, many of the Southeast Asian community have rehabilitated and transformed their lives.
Targeting a much smaller group makes a larger impact, I guess you could say. I think if you're sending about 1,800 people away out of a smaller subgroup of a larger ethnic group in the United States, it creates this talk and this fear.
These people are refugees of the Vietnam War, a war which uprooted their lives, causing tremendous pain and suffering. I have a member who is caught up in this unjust deportation. The pain and suffering of losing him cannot be healed. So I am here to tell our government that I am watching, I am listening, and I will continue to fight until no more family is torn apart by this unjust deportation.
We can sit behind our computers, we can sit behind our emails and whatever it is, social media profiles and listings, and type away all you want, but in the end, what makes what truly builds community is if you're having a respectful and human conversation with each other. And I think that is really important for individuals or people that support deportation and people that don't, to understand each other from where they're coming from. Sometimes people, will change, and sometimes people will not. But, don't go into a conversation with an intention to change somebody's mind. Go into a conversation with the intention of getting to know them as a human being.
Municipal elections for City Council and School Committee are coming up on November 5th. The outcome of the elections will set the tone and direction for the city through 2021. So it is quite important that registered voters weigh in by casting their ballots for candidates that they feel represent their points of view. But how many of Lowell's registered voters actually go to the polls for local elections? We explore that question in our next segment.
Voter turnout in Lowell is a bit of a disappointment to me. Our recent preliminary race for the City Council saw 9.5% of registered voters turn out, and this is not good. I know that more will turn out for the general municipal election. Last year, I think we had 21%, which to me is still pretty low, given that last year we had a huge controversial issue about the location of the high school.
It has not always been low in Lowell. My dad was on the City Council from 1965 through 2005. And so when he first ran back in the late 1960s, they would regularly have 30 to 40,000 people voting in city elections. I think the reason people don't vote in city elections is they don't feel connected with city government. I think that's why so many more vote in a presidential election. You can't avoid hearing about the presidential election. But the city election, you really have to almost have a vested interest in something about city government, whether you work for it, a relative works for it, or you engage directly with city government repeatedly. And it's really unfortunate because the city councilors have a greater impact on the day-to-day lives of residents of the city than the President of the United States does.
When I hear people saying things like people that don't participate because they're lazy, I know that that's absolutely not true. If anything, it's most likely because they care too much about their vote. In Lowell, we don't have sort of partisan politics, so people aren't identifying at a brand level, and it's very hard to look at, say 16 serious contenders to be a city councilor or 9 people to be school committee people and differentiate between them to say, oh, this one definitely holds my ideals or holds my values.
I think some of the obstacles to voting are some people just are very busy every minute of the day surviving, and so they don't have the opportunity to learn about government, and they don't want to go in and just make a random choice. But I think also that we're an immigrant city, and a lot of the people who come to Lowell come from places where political activity can be life-threatening, and so that's not part of the culture that they come out of, and so it's not a natural thing for them to do. Although many of them have embraced it and become involved, I think others probably just keep it at arm's length.
We need to, in general, do a better job of reaching out to our minority communities, going to places where they are and trying to bring them in to government.
So if we got a mixture of people, not only ethnically but age-wise, like a spectrum in the demographics of the city, I think what you'll see is more listening to the broader city of Lowell, right? And that can't help but find its way into the motions and into the administration of the city.
Bringing the person running for office closer to the people that he or she represents might help voter turnout, because there'd be an opportunity for more engagement, one-on-one engagement or small group engagement. Whereas if you're running citywide, you have to try to reach all 59,000 registered voters.
We need to make voting accessible, easy for everyone, and we just need to get the word out there. I'd love to see 100%, never will in my life.
Don't forget to vote on Tuesday, November 5th. For information on Lowell elections, visit the Election and Census Department's website. Staying with the topic of elections, city councilors chose the 2 new voting system options that will be on the ballot for Lowellians to choose between this November. Changing a voting system can be a complicated task, and the city is trying to clarify the options for voters. On October 7th, the manager's office held an information session at the Senior Center.
Lowell's on the verge of some change, okay? And what is this change? It's about the voting rights situation. There was a charge that the system should change. It was much discussed. It was mediated well. and we came up with some options.
So what you're going to face on the ballot is an option between the two. Option 1 is the ranked choice, and option 2 is the hybrid system. The point is you should choose one of them. If you vote yes on both of them, you've just canceled out your vote. The same if you vote no on both of them. So you're going to vote yes on one and no on the other. And
proportional representation, the Cincinnati method, is the method by which voters in Cambridge elect members of city council and school committee. It ensures minority representation with majority control. In Cambridge, any group of voters that number more than 1/10 of the votes cast can be sure of electing at least one member of a 9-member council. In a PR election, you may vote for as many candidates listed on the ballot as you wish, but you must rank the candidates in order of preference. Under PR, a candidate needs to win a certain proportion of votes to be elected. This winning fraction of votes is referred to as the quota. Any candidates who reach the necessary quota with number 1 votes are declared elected. This is done on election night and is known as the first count. The count continues with elimination of those candidates receiving fewer than 50 votes in the first count. The ballots are distributed to the other candidates according to the next preference marked. After each distribution, the candidate now having the lowest number of votes is eliminated, and his or her ballots distributed to the next indicated preference.
So we have 6 at-large city councilors, and then we have 5 district city councilors. When it comes to basically, electing the district city councilors, we have divided the city into 5 districts, and the division of those districts is done by the Board of Election Commissioners. Basically, once they separate, the precincts and they separate the districts, then from there, we are electing our city councilors based on those districts. We also want to point out that in order to run for a district office, you do have to collect less signatures than you're running for at large. When it comes to, the city councilor's responsibilities in the city of Worcester, usually the first call that comes from the resident is to the district councilor. We also see a lot of the district councilors attend community meetings, and they represent neighborhood associations. So they do play a little more hands-on role when it comes to neighborhood involvement.
For more information, visit yourlowellyourvote.org. The annual Lowell Celebrates Kerouac Festival took place from October 10th to 14th. This year marked the 50th anniversary of Jack's passing and featured recitations of his work, as well as a jazz funeral march led by the Revolutionary Snake Ensemble.
Tradition is one that it's one of the greatest American traditions, one of the greatest American contributions to culture in the world would be jazz music. And jazz music was one of the things that was integral as an influence to Jack Kerouac, both in his life and in his writing.
My soul thrills to touch the soft used meaty pages covered with oddities of reading. At last, I'm opening the magic brown book. I see the great curlicued print, the immense candelabra first led us at the beginnings of chapters, and pictures of rosy fairies and blue mist gardens with gingerbread hall and skylark rooftops with breadcrumbs on them.
It informed his cultural sensibilities, but also his stylistic sensibilities. And the jazz funeral tradition is really, it came out of the origins of jazz. In New Orleans, the black musicians would have a funeral. They would do the slow march on the way to the cemetery to put the body into the ground, and then at that point the music would turn and it would become upbeat, and that's what they would call the second line.
We talked about jazz as actually a metaphor for compassion, because I have a tune and Timmy will have a tune, and we put them together and we get a third thing, which means that we are listening to someone else and listening to the beat.
Kerouac's literary style that he invented called spontaneous prose. And in his famous poem, Mexico City Blues, 242 choruses, he said, I want to be considered a jazz poet blowing a long blues in an afternoon jam session. And really, that's the way he approached his life, his work, and his writing. And so we figured that this was the perfect way to honor him 50 years after his passing right here in Lowell, to bring that sense of spontaneity, creativity, improvisation, and community all together into one package. So I really hope we did it, and I think we did it. I saw a lot of smiles and a lot of tears, a lot of emotions. It was a beautiful thing.
Kerouac developed readers' ears, and at first I didn't get it, but it is so true. To hear other people's lives, to be so sensitive to it that you become an instrument of support and of guidance and of just the best for that person that you can be. And that's the essence of what Kerouac's writing is about.
Jack Kerouac famously wrote in On the Road, everybody goes home in October, and that's what we feel. We bring everybody here. People have come from all over the world this weekend to celebrate this beautiful city, and it's very humbling as somebody who grew up here to be able to help present this to the world.
To think all these years later, Jack is still here more than ever, and his writing is here forever. We'll encourage and inspire all of you not to be like him, but to be like you.
In this week's Sunspot, Lowell Sun Enterprise editor Chris Scott sits down with the new senior editor of The Sun, Tom Shattuck.
Good evening, everyone. I am Chris Scott, the Enterprise Editor at The Sun. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Sunspot. We're kind of going off script a little bit this week. We're not having on a politician or a public safety official. We're having on the new senior editor at The Sun, my boss, a guy sitting here to my left, Tom Shattuck. Hi. Tom, thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Well, everybody else fell through is what you're saying, and here you go. You dragged me out of the office, but I love this town. I love it.
It's quite a city.
It's quite a city. I'm learning so much. What's blown me away from being at the Lowell Sun with you, and by the way, thank you for saving me day in and day out. But
you're very welcome. Thank you.
What's blown me away is that all of the requests I get and phone calls I get and the outreach that I get, it's almost by far, it's people from the community wanting to help people from the community, which is not what I was getting back at the Boston Herald. It's a different thing, and I'm just learning here that the culture of this city, it is community with a capital C, and people know, everybody seems to know each other.
Well, one of the former police chiefs who went on to Boston, Ed Davis, used to call it the fourth largest city in the state, which it was at that time. I think now it's fifth, but yet it's a very small city. It's only 11 square miles, and those relationships that have built up over centuries are still very much evident today. Now at the Herald, you were the editorial page editor.
Yes.
And you oversaw the creation of Boston Herald Radio as well. How has those posts, how have you been able to transition into the senior editor job at The Sun with that as background?
Well, so it's interesting. It goes right back to community as well, because certainly laying out pages and finding, for when I was with the Boston Herald, finding a direction editorial-wise and using the op-eds to tell a story, to build it's almost a symphony of thought and opinion is thematically part of the workflow day to day. That's very fun, and you get to use your creativity. I was at one point at the Herald, I was writing an editorial day essentially, which is it's good. It's a lot of writing. It's a crash course in every possible subject you could take, because I don't know about South Shore rail ties right now. But if it's an issue, you've got to find out about it. You've got to talk to people, and you've got to cram. So
you have to report the editorial just as you would a news story, essentially, right?
Absolutely. And so we're telling a story at the Herald, and that's what we're doing at the Lowell Sun as well. So we're telling a story, whether it's a crime story, or whether it's a blight or progress story about the part of the city, or a health story, etc. We're obviously we're dispensing information, but over and above that, where the overall theme is that things are on the move, people are on the move, there is progress being made, and our job, as you know, and you should be answering this question. You're the guy who runs everything day to day, but our job is to inform and give analysis. The Lowellians and people in our market area are hardworking people. And they don't have time to do the deep dives into everything.
What's your impression of the Sun just being here for 3 to 4 weeks? We try to keep it local, although we do, as we've talked about in the office, we're in extraordinary times, particularly in Washington, D.C. So that page one real estate isn't always local. It often has a state story on it or a national story, which I think is a good idea. What are your thoughts on that?
I would always try to default to local. Always. We are in extraordinary times. Nationally and a little internationally, and certainly what happens in Washington, D.C., what happens on Pennsylvania Ave and in the Capitol does trickle down and affect our day-to-day here, so we have to keep that on the radar. But Lowell itself is so all-encompassing that you can make a living just here. I mean, the city is extremely diverse. There are businesses coming in, there are colleges, and there's so much happening here. And it's not formulaic. When I was covering in Boston and Washington, D.C., red, blue. There's the line right there. Maybe, in D.C. now you've got the Trump Republicans and then the Never-Trumpers and you've got the resist crowd and then, what is today's incarnation of moderates. But I've found so far in Lowell that there are many factions. Many factions. Somebody who's allied with somebody else on issue A is completely opposed on issue B. I mean, the stories I've gotten and the tales about the high school debate.
Oh boy.
I know. Tell me that there are deep divisions in interests in the city, and people are invested, and that's great. That people care is fantastic because. I think when people look nationally sometimes with all the noise and all the chaos and all the negativity and inaccuracy in a lot of the national media on both sides now, it is simply spam and vapor that we're getting, is that people can tune out and say whatever.
Right.
But people are tuned in Lowell, and I think that puts us on the spot to be as good as we can be. And it means that, quality work is appreciated. And that's a validation that you don't get everywhere.
I think as far as the high school debate is concerned, we might not have seen the end of that. We'll see in November who gets elected to the city council. What has impressed you most about the city in terms of its architecture, its road network, its people?
So
I live in West Newbury. Down near me, actually.
Right. I just moved to West Newbury about a year ago from Melrose. It was a cute little town right outside of Boston.
Easier commute now for you, Tom.
I'll take.
Yeah.
Yes.
With the Herald being in Brentwood.
Yes, though Lowell has its own challenges with the commute. It's interesting. It seems to me that every time we're leaving, where we are in the Sun building, it's an exodus. It's an escape almost, trying to get to one of the lanes on the bridges, trying to fight to get into the right lane and things. Right. So it is harrowing. This connector can be harrowing. It always has been. But the architecture blows me away. Yeah. I know it's cliche to say, but I can't get enough of these beautiful mill buildings. I think they're gorgeous. And the canals, and I've walked around. Actually, I'm wearing sneakers. I am so ill-dressed. So every Wednesday, I've got a shoe on tight. Every Wednesday, I walk 5 or so miles around. I move well for a fat guy. I walk 5 miles around just to check things out.
Have you done your walk yet today?
I was just 3/4 into it when lunch called me too loudly. I couldn't resist. But just the back roads and the canals and even some sections, some newer architecture things are just beautiful. I love the shops, and this is actually one of the things my dad used to take us to Lowell in the 80s. He was a lobbyist for small businesses. So he would bring us up here, and we'd go to a diner or whatever, and try to steal a sign, and then and bring us by some small businesses. He was an advocate for these folks. And the vibrant small businesses, it's wonderful to see. I mean, that is the economic engine for not only Lowell, but the country. And I just...
Have you had a chance to visit many of the neighborhoods yet?
Not as much as I should have.
Yeah.
I don't like, I purposefully get lost and end up in Belvedere, and I've been in the Highlands, I think, and but no, I haven't. I've got a couple of folks who I know you know who have offered to take me around.
A tour, yep.
Yes, and I will do that. But I need to learn more. So I look forward to it. I want to know everything.
I'd like to put you on the spot just a little bit, but while trying to keep it light. You've seen the newspaper. When I first started at the newspaper more than 3 decades ago, we had 5 editions, and now we have 1. And when I was the City Hall reporter, I used to be able to write at 9 o'clock in the morning for that edition that hit the street at 1 o'clock that afternoon. Crank out 2 or 3 stories over that 2-hour span. I mean, it was awesome. Live news in people's hands at 4 o'clock.
Absolutely.
Granted, we're in a fight for community journalism. How do you see the Sun and its future in terms of community journalism today?
Oh, well, I think that's going to be the remnant of print and established media will be community journalism. I think you're going to find more and more publications, and hopefully we can more take advantage of this momentum, capturing things like high school sports, community events, etc. These are things that still are not fed, through XML or through AI, are not fed into your phone. It takes real human beings to get this information, to go out there and get real stories. So I think that is going to be the bedrock, and it is really at this point of journalism. I do think that people still love the printed page, and the advertisers love the printed page. At the Herald, one of the things that we used to do for advertisers is we'd send them kind of a front page, and it would just with we'd show their ad and whatever, and frame it. It's a $10 frame, whatever. But they loved it. Everybody wants to see an instance of themselves in print. So there's certainly still currency there. We are more and more aggressive with social media and with our online content, and that's never going to end. We have you and I are old. We've got some young staff, and they come second nature to them. They're one-man bands, and they can throw their stuff up, their stories up, and their content up on multi-platforms in seconds with one hand, while eating avocado toast with the other hand. So thank goodness they can. So I think local is the key. Like I said, this is community. The currency for this community is the interest. Is its interest in itself. I don't like the term parochialism. I don't like that. I think it sounds narrow. But they want the content. They're concerned citizens, and they need us, and we need them.
We'll try to do it. Local.
Yes.
Thomas, thank you for coming in. I appreciate
you.
it. Thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of Sunspot. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another guest. Have a good night, everyone.
And that's all for this edition of LTC News. You can find us on LTC channels 8, 95, and 99, online at ltc.org, on Roku in the LTC News playlist, on Facebook at LTC Lowell, or on our YouTube page. We leave you now with more scenes from Kerouac's Jazz Funeral March. I'm your host, Krista Brown. Thanks for joining us.